Episode 32 of Red versus Blue. My name is Mike Stark.
And I'm Keith Curry.
What a week, huh, Keith?
Well, I tell you, it has been a historic week in politics. Perhaps not since 1876, when the Republicans bailed on Reconstruction in exchange for Rutherford B. Hayes getting the electoral votes, have we seen such a quick and dramatic change in candidates. Democrats basically went to Joe Biden and said, my friend, you can't win. And despite every time he said, I'm in this race to stay, Nancy Pelosi said, the president has not yet made a decision, and they waited him out. And Democrats have replaced Scranton Joe with Berkeley Camilla. And so we'll see how that plays in Pennsylvania.
So politically, was this a good move? I mean, as a voting Democrat, I feel like we've got a new shot of adrenaline in the party, and we actually have a chance of winning now. Was the whole thing a good move?
Well, there's pluses and minuses, but the basic and most important plus is that it removes the age issue and the threshold issue of, is Joe Biden, physically and mentally capable of serving as president? And what we were seeing in the polls was that a lot of voters were saying, I can't get past the threshold issue, so I really don't care where he stands on the economy or on immigration or on the issues that are important to me, because he just can't do the job. And once voters reached that conclusion, and it was starkly evident in the debate and in the press conferences and briefings and interviews subsequent to the debate, there was no place for him to go. And to his credit, with grace and dignity, he realized that and agreed to step aside. So removing that threshold issue was fundamental to making the Democrats competitive in this race. And they are indeed very competitive. She's closed the gap a couple of points, it looks like, across the board, and more so with some key groups that were not enthusiastic with Biden, particularly blacks, women, young voters. And that's, working to the benefit of the Democrats in a way that they were not able to break through over the past several months. And very importantly, they were lagging in fundraising. And in 24 hours or 48 hours, she brought in $100 million. So the Democrats are back in the game, and it's going to be a very tight, a very nasty, and a very competitive election.
I want to remind our listeners that had they listened to this show from the very beginning, the age issue was one of the first things we talked about, and we jammed it home every week for a long time. So once again, if I might pat ourselves on the back, we were way ahead of this game.
Well, we were. And like I say, had that debate not happened in June, this conversation may not have happened until September, at which point in time it would have been too late for the Democrats to substitute a candidate, and it would have been certain defeat.
And now the age issue gets moved over to the other guy.
Well, Donald Trump, if elected in this election, will be the oldest person ever elected president. Now, he wears it a little bit better. He's a little bit more articulate. So it's not as definitive with him as it is with Biden. But if you listen carefully, he mangles his words. He confuses names. He's got his own set of issues. His problem is more attitudinal than his mental capacities. But he'll still be old, and he'll still be the oldest president, which is why I think, after the election, there'll be a bipartisan move to cap the age of the president at 80 years old. You can't be elected if you'll be 80 years old during the term of your office.
Gotcha.
And I think that would be a step forward for America.
Does that require a constitutional amendment?
It does. So it would have to be approved by the Congress and then by 2/3 of the states.
So where does this all put us now? Where are we in this crazy campaign? I don't think it could have been crazier.
Well, it really could not have been. All of these were sort of breathtakingly unexpected moves. The assassination attempt, the elevation of Vice President Harris, her ability to lock the nomination up literally in 48 hours, the debate, all of this, Biden stepping aside, it's just breathtaking in terms of the scope of unexpected things that happened. Now, where does it leave the race? Well, the race is going to be close. It's going to be competitive. The same battleground states that were on the map before are going to be on the map again. People say she's got a broader path to victory. She's not going to put North Carolina in play. She's not going to put Kentucky in play.
Right.
But she's got to win the blue wall and maybe do better in the Southwest than Biden was doing. So we'll see. Now, she does come with some significant disadvantages, Mike. She energizes the Democrats. The energy on the Democratic side has been huge. She also energizes the Republicans. Republicans absolutely loathe Kamala Harris. And I will just say, while Republicans could, grit their teeth and get through the Biden years, everybody basically said, all right, he's been in politics a long time. He's an honorable guy. He can do the job. But they just hate Kamala. She was rated the most liberal in the United States Senate. Now, this is a United States Senate that included Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. So there was some competition for that title. But she is far to the left and out of touch with, I think, mainstream voters, and she's going to have to overcome that. And also because she is the vice president, unlike a different nominee the Democrats could have put forward, she has got to bear the sins of the Biden administration, good and bad, going into the election. So if you didn't like Biden's economic policy, if you don't like his immigration policy, which she was apparently at one point in time the titular head of, you're not going to like her. And a lot of people don't like those policies. So she did not make an improvement there. She also has a reputation of being a bad personnel manager. 90% of her staff is turned over. This goes all the way back to her time as a DA and attorney general. So she's got some personnel and personal management issues that she's got to deal with. But on the whole, she's a more competitive candidate than Joe Biden is going to be.
We talk about how liberal she is, and we have seen in past elections that liberal candidates tend to move towards the middle the closer it gets to the general election. Do you expect some of that?
She's going to try, but she's going to have a hard time with her record. I mean, she literally grew up in Berkeley. She was the DA in San Francisco. She signed ballot arguments for Proposition 47, which in California made it more difficult to prosecute under $950 theft crimes. Well, guess what? California voters are going to have on the ballot to repeal that, something she sponsored. Right. So while she's going to try to be a prosecutor going after the felon, her record, she bailed out the George Floyd protesters. So she's got a lot of baggage that she's going to have to carry. It remains to be seen if the Republican campaign will be effective in tagging her with that. But just as we've seen, old clips from Trump and Vance being put on TV, expect to see the greatest hits of Kamala Harris from MSNBC talking with Rachel Maddow or one of the others over there as well, where she's sucking up to the Democratic base because she grew up in California where the correct play was to play to the progressive left. And that's not going to play well across the country.
Now, would a proper vice president choice help correct some of that?
Well, it might. Typically, the vice presidents, whether they're really good or really bad, don't bring a lot to the ticket. The first rule of being a vice presidential candidate is do no harm. But even candidates like Sarah Palin, Dan Quayle, who people thought were less than ready for prime time, didn't really hurt the candidate at the top. They seldom will carry a state. You have to go back to Lyndon Johnson in Texas in 1960 to see where a vice presidential candidate truly made a difference in the state. But because things are so close, Arizona and Pennsylvania could be put into play by her vice presidential pick.
And as long as we're talking about vice presidents, let's talk about the vice president pick of the Republican Party. Was it a good one?
Like with Harris, there's two sides to that question. Now, I was prepared to say that because I looked at it this week, his movie is number 4 on Netflix. His book has got a 4-week back order at Amazon. His interview that he did with David Rubenstein on C-SPAN is now running in reruns on C-SPAN. And his book is number 1 at the Newport Beach Public Library. So much like Howard Stern, I was going to say that he was the king of all media this week. Unfortunately, what was also running were some of his statements that he did on the Tucker Carlson show about childless cat ladies who are running the country and running it into the muck. The best meme I saw was Taylor Swift with a cat over her shoulders saying, "Cat ladies, stand back and stand by," or something like that, the Proud Boys quote. Right. So my advice to candidates, if you have national ambitions, don't go on Tucker Carlson or don't go on Steve Bannon or don't go on Rachel Maddow and say outrageous, stupid stuff to appeal to that audience because it will come back. Videotape is forever. Here's the thing. He was probably not vetted properly because he was Don Trump Jr.'s choice. And they do things intuitively and sort of on the seat of the pants over there. He has a compelling personal story. You cannot see the movie and not be impressed with how he's overcome his background. But he's moving in a direction that just is awkward and uncomfortable for a lot of Americans. What was interesting is that I've heard both a Republican and a Democratic political strategist say that he may be dumped from the ticket. Now, I think that logistically would be so difficult and create such a turmoil that they're not going to do it. But the fact that that conversation happens tells you that the rollout has been, shall we say, less than good.
Yeah, exactly. And in terms of the book sales and the Netflix movie ratings, I have to admit, I hadn't seen the movie, and I did watch the movie just to get some insight into this guy. And I felt that it was a great story. I thought Glenn Close was amazing in the film. But I was touched by the fact that here's a guy that sucks up to all the Republican talking points, which a lot of them aim at his roots. He sort of abandoned his own people.
The tragedy of Donald Trump, and it's most notable with somebody like Tim Scott, is that everybody he touches or comes in contact with suffers or turns to crap.
Well, for Vance, at least, even if they throw him off the ticket, he's sold some books.
He sold 1 million copies of his book in the initial printing, and now he's going to sell probably 1 million more.
Wow.
So he was very successful as an author.
Okay, so we still have a vice president to pick on the Democratic side. What do you see for that?
The Democrats actually have some very good candidates. Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, an astronaut. He has a moderate voting record. He was in the military. He's the husband of Gabby Giffords, became a gun control advocate after she was shot. A very compelling personal story. Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. He's won twice in Pennsylvania. He was attorney general. He's got a compelling presentation skills about him. He's strong on Israel, which the Democrats may need some help on. Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina, 67 years old, so an older hand, very close friends with Harris. Probably not going to put North Carolina in play. Also, he had a very contentious relationship with the Republican legislature and Republican officials in his state. So doesn't have the same reputation as a unifier. Andy Beshear, a very successful governor in red state Kentucky. He made his bones and his reputation really on disaster relief. He's not going to turn Kentucky either. So I think the two likely candidates are Mark Kelly and Josh Shapiro. Shapiro is Jewish. Harris's husband is Jewish. And given, as you saw with Netanyahu's visit to Washington, the knife edge that Democrats are trying to walk on the Israel thing, Shapiro may be one Jew too many for the ticket. I would bet on Kelly, but it could be either one of those, or it could be somebody else. And I think they will compare well with J.D. Vance. Should make for an interesting debate. Here's a little factoid, though, Mike. There have only been 2 vice presidents who have been elected directly from the office of vice president to the presidency.
Really?
Really. One was Martin Van Buren, and the other was George H.W. Bush. There have been other vice presidents, Nixon and Biden, for example, but they had to sit a term out before they could get back into the chute. But only 2 in the nation's history have been elected directly from the vice presidency.
Right. Wow. I love your factoids, my friend. And on that factoid, I think we can wrap it up for the week. We have another week ahead of us, right, Keith? And God knows what could happen.
Stay tuned, because these days anything can happen.
Thanks for joining us on another edition of Red versus Blue. Be sure and subscribe. Go to our Facebook page and like us. And we'll be back next week with another edition of Red versus Blue.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.